Nobody wants to go out and talk or do something else. So, but with us covering the importance of understanding our online material last month, if there was a time to talk about this, I figured it's as close as we ever get. So looking today to talk through digital personal privacy and go at least broach the topic for the church to talk through together. Slide, please. So when we talk about digital personal privacy, a lot of people think of the old days where we used to get mail that someone else would take and read, where it had our personal information in it. A lot of what is gathered today is not really considered just PII or personal information. A lot of different material can constitute what is collected from an individual or household, and that's normally spoken to as metadata, and it could be everything from IT type information in the background to how long you're looking at something, or durations, or even who it's sent to or what's attached in it. So everything that makes up the conglomerated data is tracked as that metadata material. Slide, please. There's been a lot of discussion about it over the last 3 years, I'd say, in the news and media about what Congress is trying to do, and we've seen recently Facebook and others get flagged in congressional hearings for speaking to how they've used that data and what they're collecting on folks. Google remains the largest US-based collector of data, and everything that we touch, whether it's the web page or even picking up a phone if you don't have an Android, or if you don't have an iPhone, excuse me, it is in that domain of Google data. And because of this, the US is one of the largest collectors of metadata in any country, right? We only have so many individuals, like 600 million something, living in the US, but compared to other nations with much higher populations, the amount of data collected on our population well exceeds what you see in most other countries. That is changing, so you know, next 5 years, that's probably not going to hold anymore as some of the other nations focus heavier on collecting data on their population. But right now, most of the cyber attacks that you see to collect data from these major corporations are focused against the US, and part of that's because of the power and money it brings by knowing that much about how society interacts. Government's been trying to put laws in place over the last 30 years, I'd say, to protect personal identifiable information, or PII, right? So in the government's eyes, that includes telephone number, email address, and they've defined specific criteria that makes it identifiable of who you are as an individual. But steps to protect you as a user or a beneficiary of technical information or use technology these days isn't following suit as much as some of the laws that were put in place to stop some of the scamming things back in the day, if you think the phone techniques of trying to fish for information. Slide, please. It's hard to think, but pretty much every electronic device we come into contact with these days has some data that is collected on it. So whether it's internet, whether it's browsing on your phone, whether it's looking at an app on your phone, or watching television, all these mechanisms have a means and do send data to companies that store information on you. Slide, please. go, yep, perfect. Google, as we said, is the largest user of the collector of this data. And if you look at how much revenue they've taken in over the last almost 20 years, it's exceeded expectations of a lot of companies for the size of infrastructure that they put into it, right? The reason they're able to do this is because of how useful they've made their tools to the general populace, and how easy it is for us to give material as well as use that material to the company. Slide, please. This presents a lot harder to read than I had hoped, but next few slides go through an analysis by security.org that put out what type of data different companies collect on their users. And, oh, awesome, thank you. And not all of these are captured by each company, because some of them are protected by the personal information laws, but others the company still gets around. If you look here, there's a lot of stuff that we would consider more private type information, right? We wouldn't want a company gathering all this and advertising it to anybody who wants. But if you look at what they do collect on the larger scale, it's listed in green. If we could zoom back out. There is still quite a bit that they collect and store in the database as information on each user. A lot of that data is your likes and your preferences, right? So they may not have it tagged here to your username, but they do collect information that Mike Thompson does these things when using anything related to Google. Slide, please. In addition to what we consider personal information, there's a lot of other information in the background that is used that is not considered tied to you specifically. So IP address is tied to the device that you're using. I would not use your phone, so most likely your IP address for your phone is still you, and the companies realize that, right? So even though your name's not on it, they still build a profile on the individual that may not have your name or username attached to it, but is still traceable to the same data. The companies make money not by, sorry, let me take a step back. The way that the laws are structured today, the companies cannot sell your personal information as this is Mike Thompson. But if they take enough steps to make it anonymous, where it's difficult to trace directly to the individual, which in some cases just means scrubbing the names off the data, they are still able to gather that data, lump it together with other major data sources, and then sell it to other companies for use. So this slide is more representing what defines the device that you're using and what they collect on that device. Next slide, please. And when we look at what they monitor, it's pretty much everything you do, right? Different companies do this to different levels. So Google, they try to stay away from the actual content of your message, but they do still scan it, for example, with email, right? They may not read it, but their algorithms still go through what's sent so that they get a sense of what your interests are. Heavy focus by most companies these days are on your purchases. They want to know where you're spending your money, what you like, and where you're more likely to spend money. So there's a lot that is commercially driven by the data that's gathered. But there's a lot here that has nothing to do with how you're likely to spend your money too, right? How long you talk to somebody, how often you talk to them, and who you talk to doesn't necessarily help outside of defining what demographic you hang out with. Slide, please. And then these are two that have always been troubling to me, right? So the information that they gather these days for GPS and sensor data. So your phone can pick up how you're holding it, information on your physical well-being. There's a lot of sensors that are in our devices these days that have nothing to do with making a phone call. There's interesting data out there now with ability to track different Wi-Fi sources as well as use Bluetooth. There's different technologies where they can actually map areas and get better precision than general GPS in a lot of cases, just by looking at what networks you're able to touch where the device is located. So a lot of data that tracks where you go, what you're doing, and how you're using electronic devices. The intent of this is not to say how scary the world we live in is, but just to make it, put it out there for everybody's consideration of what type of data we're using and what others could possibly do with it. In terms of the GPS and sensor data, Congress has put a lot of laws that restrict how websites are used, right? Most of the focus over the last 20 years has been, in relation to the internet, has been website-based. And that's why you see all those pop-ups for, will you let us use cookies and stuff when we go on websites today, because they've changed how companies have to report or track what is used on internet web pages. But the same laws do not apply, and if you've seen the number of companies trying to get you to use their app instead of their internet page, the laws do not apply to applications. So as soon as you download an application, you're giving them permission to do whatever they want with the types of information that are in the small print that nobody reads, right? But that explains why you see everybody trying to push you to watch TV on their app instead of going to their web page and just watching whatever you want through that login process. Slide, please. Now, personally, it doesn't scare me that companies do this on the whole, right? But when you look at what different companies collect, in conglomeration, that can be, in my personal opinion, too much information that I want to take, right? So for example, Amazon, they don't collect the same data, but one of the ones that they do is social security number, and I don't know how that helps them at all. Back out again real quick just to see the larger list, please. And they don't own YouTube, so it makes sense that they won't track what you're watching there. But in conglomeration, if you compare this to what Google used, for example, you know, you could pretty much know everything there is about somebody just by going through the data. I would make the argument that in most cases, Google probably knows us and our kids better than we do. just from, you know, the models that they're able to put together on what you're interested in.
The only way is to get rid of the cell phone.
So there's you can do to minimize it, make it more difficult for them to build a full profile. But you're right, there's not. If you're going to use the device, they're still going to collect some level of data on you. I'll get to those here in a few slides. How is knowing this useful? I'll also try to get to that in a couple slides. So give me a minute, okay? Slide, please. So how that data is scrubbed, basically the companies like Google will collect it all, And whether they do it internally or hire a third-party company to do it, they'll try to make the data anonymous. And what that classifies as is removing enough of those identifiers that are considered personal information that when they lump it together with other users, they can't say that this one is Mike Thompson, right? That only goes so far though, because they will take Facebook, for example, right? When they sell that data to others that are interested, they will use it to market to people that are into red t-shirts, for example, right? So if there's enough identifiers out there and somebody is looking to target a specific area, they are able to say, I want people that wear red t-shirts and live in this area code, and can still buy the profile data for that group or demographic. Slide, please. So even though there's steps required by law to retain some level of anonymity, it only goes so far when we're talking about that data. I understand it's a large topic and can be a scary topic, but the reason I wanted to talk about it with the church is there's a number of ways this data has been used for breaking our electoral system to some level and other negative things worldwide. So take example, methods have been used to target electoral groups to try to convince them, not necessarily Republican or Democrat, but more people that are center-minded to sway their opinion one way or another. In our elections, it's used across the board for rigging things in other countries. They have proof that things have been just made up and spread across the board wildly where it was legal to do so. And it did change the outcome of that election. But these are done by corporations that have financial incentives to do so, and they're testing the use of the technologies in different areas. If we look at, I think it was Myanmar, or some of the countries abroad, not necessarily Google, but Facebook was key in some of the genocide that took place over there. And then from how foreign actors or agencies have used the technology, they have done riots or other illegal activities stemmed from the use. Big part of it, like we said, was corporate advertising for monetary incentive. Slide, please. So to your point, there isn't really anything we could do to stop the data from being gathered. You could throw away every electronic device that you personally own, but if anybody that you come in contact with owns an electronic device, there's still a footprint, right? So I don't think I'm trying to tell everybody to go to the Stone Ages with this topic, but there are steps that we can do that helps protect you legally, right? So there's companies that will advertise they'll scan if your data is being used maliciously, and for a fee, of course. Having antivirus does stop some of the, or flag if there's illegal means being used to collect data outside of what is legal. And then one of the things that helps a lot to break up what data is gathered against you is minimizing the use of some of the larger company tools. So Google, for example, everybody has a Gmail account. Everything that goes into that is analyzed and critiqued and used to define who you are. There's other companies that have user guidelines that they don't collect data on their users. They make their funding sources in other ways. So changing out, what search engine you use, what email you use is a couple steps you can do to minimize that. The permissions that you have set on your phone for what Google is allowed to monitor is your choice on your phone, right? They give you that freedom to say no. A lot of the times it'll say device may not work the same if you do this. you turn it off, I've never noticed the device not work. but you know, figuring out the technical part, they put that out there because it's on your shoulders if you're not using it the way they want you to. And then if you haven't heard of a VPN, a virtual private network, there are companies that do that for free. Often slows down your internet connection when you go with the free ones, but there's also paid subscriptions you can have that basically encrypt the information that you're sending over the internet, send it to a different centralized source so that when the data comes out, it looks like you're in Chicago and mixed with, you know, 500,000 other people that are using that same IP address. So makes it a little more difficult to track, but when you have subscriptions with companies, again, they're still gathering some data on you just from the sake that you're using their service. The main reason I brought this up, it is easier today than ever to target somebody, get them to read exactly what you are paying for them to read, and them never know it than we've ever had in society, right? So ever since I started trying to change some of this up, all my advertisement that I've been seeing on internet pages and everything is now targeting me as a Democrat, which for personal disclosure, I've never really considered myself. So I would say it makes it more difficult for them to put you in a specific box if you try to change what you're looking at here. Bottom two bullets is what I was hoping to stress the most with the congregation. So I would say best thing you could do is stay connected with the rest of the church, right? A lot of what we're seeing on the news or get data online for is targeted for us, right? And the only way of knowing or gauging how that's impacting us is by talking about our lives with each other and keeping our focus on things that matter in life. And then also it's not always fun because it gets some people's heart rates going or blood pressure up, but try to look for viewpoints outside of what you normally subscribe to, just so that you're getting more than just one side of the story on issues, because there's too many cases these days where how it's written can make Pastor Darren preaching on Sunday seem like the worst thing in the world when there wasn't anything happening. So it sometimes helps to get that outside feedback other than our normal news stream. Did I have a backup slide, or was that the last? Okay. One of the resources out there, every company that you'll look up on the internet is doing it for monetary profit. I don't think there's anything different than this. But there is a large list of what different companies gather and some of the steps you could take to try to minimize that, listed on security.org. Of the websites I was trying to gather data on, it was one of the more helpful ones to use. I'm not saying buy anything from them, so please keep that in mind. I'm not trying to push people to pick their product, but if you're looking for lists on more information, that's a good resource to look at. Did that answer your question on what we can do, or any other along those lines? Okay. Tim. that service is legal, right?
Yeah. I can access that, I can get a hold of, companies and things like that to be able to blanket an area or something like that just by having, it identifies, again, phone numbers and things that you can just text. I mean, you guys have gotten these, I've gotten things from the mayoral race constantly coming through on my phone that I never necessarily, as far as I'm aware, necessarily requested or anything like that. It just comes through via some other, pipeline or something that maybe I have been on or accessed that now makes them privy to. Or like you said, they're just accessing that information as well.
One of the best decisions I ever made was not to get an Iowa phone number. It's helped with that one specifically, but it's crazy. It's crazy.
Familiar with this book? I heard the author interviewed on public radio some time ago, but she's a professor at the Harvard Business School and wrote a book called Surveillance Capitalism. It's about all this stuff, and it's one of those kind of on my to-read list if I'll ever get around to it. But boy, you look at this stuff and you begin to think all the nefarious possibilities that are out there. You wonder, I've heard China with their social credit system and things, this information gets into the wrong hands, or into the kind of the hands of a totalitarian sort of regime or regime that wants to suppress dissent. And you can become a social pariah based upon what's known about you. It can make your life very difficult. So I'm just wondering, how does that affect the way we as Christians use these tools? And these tools are using us to that extent. I'm especially concerned about kids. I don't remember sitting down with your team, you pulled up Snapchat and said, I can see where all these kids are. Right? That is their system. So in answer to John's questions about usefulness, you just got to be aware of the advice about this stuff. You just can't be naive. These are, neutral tools. We're being used and manipulated. And so...
Used and manipulated, that, maybe not individually, but as a group, yes.
Agreed. And the intent of the presentation, again, is not to try to, make everybody feel uncomfortable, but it is data that is gathered on each of us, right? So if we're going to live peaceful lives, we should know how that data is used.
I was just going to say that one of the things, too, and I think this is something that this is just my personal feelings of what I've noted, but people who are not, I'd say, digitally native, like this is something they've come into much later in life using this kind of technology. And I've just noticed this in interacting, between our generation versus, my mom's generation. It's my mom's generation and, tend to be more, oh, that looks interesting, click. Oh, that looks interesting, click. And I've tried to explain to my mom many times, every time you go and you click on something, you go down that bunny trail of beyond, it's like being in the supermarket, instead of sticking to your list of where you knew where to go, you just started pulling all sorts of things off the shelves, and next thing you know, you end up with a bunch of junk in your cart. It's the same thing on the internet. You need to be aware of what you're going and actively looking for, and not just clicking on a thing, because those things they're throwing at you, that's the algorithm targeting you. So if you weren't on the internet going to go look up a specific event, but you saw something off on the sidebar, you're basically clicking to say, I'm interested in this, and I'm going to allow you to follow me down this trail. So taking the time to also be aware of what you're on the internet for and doing and sticking to that and not giving them more than they're already getting off of you is, I think, really, can be very helpful and may keep you from getting more stuff thrown at you.
I had something interesting happen a while back. I was curious of, okay, I've done a lot of residential design work, so I'm interested in projects out there that are the up-and-coming thing for what users want for their homes. And so I was just curious about what it would cost to install a walk-in bathtub. Okay, before this point, I never got any advertising. As soon as I did that search, from then on for the next month, I was flooded with information about you know, especially local dealers that sold walk-in bathtubs. And so when we do a search, all of this comes into play, and then they flood us with information.
Well, and they dangle sometimes. There's a commercial out right now, and I don't know if it's for one of the VPN companies or whatever, but it's basically like, you know, a couple, middle-aged to older couple, in a hotel room, and she asks her husband, "What's your date of birth?" And he's like, "You know, I can get this 6-piece chicken nugget or whatever." And he's like, "Yeah, I think I got this free road." You know, and it's just like they dangle these little prizes in front of you or rewards for providing this information that they're going to then use for who knows what, forever, you know. And it's just like, you know, all these little things that are thrown to you. Ooh, that sounds like fun. I really like that, but think about the ramifications of what that could mean long term. So,
And if they're advertising to your age group, they're targeting you. So that's a very good point. So personal fears. Oh, sorry. Please.
All that information is already out there, so I really like the point about staying in the Word and staying connected to your group. And I think it's, you know, I was talking to my parents all the time, don't be a target. Just know it's there. And if people say, well, should I get dark web insurance? Sorry, but you're already in the dark web, and you're not going to help you with anything. It's already there. Just be aware. Do a good thing by showing that it's already out there. I mean, I don't think any of us can do anything today to undo what's already been done. So just be aware.
And you do have a voice for reaching out to companies and saying, you know, I don't want my data stored, right? So that would be a lifelong process if I try to do that with every company. But I do personally try to select, you know, the ones that I want to remove.
On the one side of it, I can ask for information about a particular item or topic, and then it will flood me with information after that. But every once in a while, I wonder, what did I do? Because I'm flooded with a whole bunch of information, and I didn't ask for that. So sometimes innocent things that we do have sometimes major impacts on the data the advertising that we're getting.
Right? They're seeing what captures your attention. So.
Had my maiden name, and I went to my parents' house. I'm like, do you really think these people know who I am? So I think sometimes it's just the data that's already out there.
And I'm not saying Google's, you know, the Antichrist, so please don't take my message the wrong way there. But on the type of data that's gathered, just think if somebody, you know, was born today, didn't pay attention to the topic, and just left what was out there on the internet, literally every step they've ever taken in their life would be cataloged by Google, would be available on their personal device for anybody who picked up their phone to look at and use, right? Every conversation you ever had would be recorded and available to anybody that had your username and picked up your phone. So not saying, you know, all of these are mandatory, but at least think about how that data is impacting you. There are no other. I had a high school teacher back in the 90s that was warning the way they were changing the search engines to focus on that specific topic was destroying academia's ability to research anything, right? Because you're no longer doing a keyword search based on what you actually asked for. They're doing what they think you're asking for. So, all right, appreciate everybody's time, and hope you have